Imagine having access to a tribe of mentors consisting of some of the best tech leaders in the world, people you may have never heard of, but who in just an hour, you'll know their unfiltered career story, the bets they took, the decisions they made, where they failed, and the lessons that they learned along the way. Welcome to the What Makes You Tick podcast. Hi, I'm Tolu, aka the Podfather, and I'm the host of What Makes You Tick.
And I'm Richard Washington, founder of Tick Talent. We're delighted to sponsor this podcast. Tolu, who do we have on this week?
This week we have Volker on the podcast. What did you think of the episode?
I've been saying his name wrong the whole time. I've been saying Volker, and you're like, no, I asked him. How do you know how to pronounce his name correctly, Tolu?
So I ask, how would your mum say your name? Because the way your mum says your name is how your name is meant to be said. So that's what I was asking.
Nice. I'm Richard! Okay, so I'm really excited to speak to Volker, Volker, I should say, because I've met Volker through Pavilion, another wonderful Pavilion connection. He's got a podcast called Man Up, Man Down, which is all about men's mental health.
He is a legend in podcasting. He's a multiple podcaster. When he was telling me at the beginning, I was like, I am not worthy. He's got many podcasts and it's amazing. They're great.
Did you have massive imposter syndrome?
No, but I admired someone further in the game. Yeah. Imposter syndrome, no thank
you. Well, you do talk about it in the podcast, which is good. So we've been flapping about a lot in this intro, but I think it's going to resonate really well with people, because you can definitely see it's live. So, he's got this wonderful giving mentality, right? And he's been through an incredible journey. And it's not the kind of classic journey where he's still in a very senior revenue leadership role in a big company. He's gone and broken out and he's doing it by himself, but he's also doing courses to teach other people about becoming fractionals. He does a bunch of stuff around mental health. He does a bunch of stuff around personal coaching of successful people. And he is a fractional interim and consultant in tech leadership and sales. So there's so many strings to this man's bow. What did you most enjoy about the conversation?
Oh, most enjoy. That's a tough one, to be honest. I really liked hearing what makes him tick when he was talking about the giving mentality and how do you actually balance that in a quite selfish career, but he's found a really nice balance with that. And even just hearing what he wants to do with the future, where he's learning about, therapy, psychology, hypnotherapy, he said, I was like, wow, going to be very interesting to see how that shapes out. And there was a really interesting bit at the end where it can feel a little bit sad depending on how you look at it. So I'd love to know what people think of the bit at the end.
Nice. Good sizzle. Let's get ready for the steak. So without further ado, let's roll the VT.
Volker, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Tolu.
Absolute pleasure, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Just from my little pre-chat, I'm very excited to get into this. So, first question is, Volker, what makes you tick?
What makes me tick? If I say it's a good question, but as you just said, right, that's the question you always start with. So, what makes me tick is helping people. That's essentially my passion, helping people, and obviously, as I work in sales, helping people in sales, really.
And where do you think that started from?
Ooh, that's a good question. If I say like anything, right? It probably started in my childhood.
Okay.
That I just always enjoyed helping people. Making people feel better. If I say, I don't want to say it was never about me, right? Because obviously, as a salesperson, it's sometimes about you.
Yeah.
But it is, right? But just being able to get other people to stand out. And, for them to be in the limelight, right? I never needed to be in the limelight. I just, like to do a good job. So, I'm happy for other people to take all the credit. As long as I get the commission, right?
Yeah. Two very different things.
Yeah, exactly.
So what I was wondering is that you mentioned, that those are some things from your childhood. Are there any moments that stick out particularly for you in terms of that?
Oh, okay. So moments from when I was younger in that approach. Oh, I mean, how far back do we want to go, right?
So an example for me, right, is that when I can remember when I realized that leadership was really important, because when I was, I think, 16 or 17, at college, we were part of Young Enterprise, where you create a company and then you have to lead that company. And I became the managing director, but I didn't lead very well. And then I got usurped by the other person I ran against. And that's when I realized, like, leadership is really, really important. You have to get better at leadership. So that's that's when I started thinking about leadership. So I'm intrigued. When did you start to realize that actually, like, I love to help people? I don't care about credit.
Oh, but probably at uni, to be honest.
Okay.
So way before I went into sales, I mean, I'm sure we come to that. I ended up in sales more by accident, but I did enjoy it. And I justified with, helping people, right? Essentially, because you do, as long as you sell something that helps other people, right? But it was probably at uni when I discovered that that's what I really wanted to do, just helping people.
Okay. And so tell me the story of how you got into sales.
So I got into sales. I mean, given we were introduced by a recruiter, I hope I can tell that story, right? So I did, if I say in typical German fashion, when I came to the UK, I kind of felt like I had to do a master's degree, right? So I did my undergrad, finished that in Aberdeen University, and then did my MBA at Aberdeen. And when you finish with an MBA, you kind of want to go into consulting, right? So I applied to consulting companies, and I had interviews, and didn't really work out. And then started, if I say, looking on the job sites for recruitment consulting, right? I'm like, these are consultants, right? So, I could be a recruitment consultant. No idea what it was. And I spoke to a couple, and one said, "Oh, you can't do that in the UK because, you're not a native speaker." And I'm like, "Really?" And I'm like, if this is just kind of like a sales role, why don't I just go into sales, right? And so I made, in my head, I made this journey from consultant to sales is a good thing, and ended up in sales. And because, people didn't like me to be, German or non-native, if I say being a recruiter in English, I decided I'm going to look for sales roles that are German. So I ended up in telemarketing. Into the German market. So that's how I started in sales. And I remember my first day in telemarketing, I looked at the phone and, looked at the door. I looked at the phone, I looked at the door, and I'm like, I need to pick up this living phone and call people I've never known.
Yeah.
I can walk out this door, right? And it was an interesting moment, because I was thinking, obviously, again, from a cultural point of view, having all these degrees, sitting there with a telemarketing role, is that what I want to do? And I'm like, let's just give it a go, right? And I loved it. I loved it for about 18 months, I have to admit. After 18 months, I was a bit bored and I moved on. But I think what, the skills I learned in those 18 months were great, right? Like, if I say to this day, right? I always say my wife still makes me call the takeaway companies, right? So she goes like, "Oh, you're better in calling people than I am," and I'm like, "Great." So, but I pick up the phone, I talk to people, and I think that's a skill that a little bit goes amiss these days, right? People don't talk to each other anymore; they rely on social media and emails and so on. So, a great skill to have. Loved every minute of it, and good money as well.
What would be your top 3 tips? Because you're right, it is a bit of a lost skill, just being able to pick up the phone, have a conversation, and build a relationship. So what would be your top 3 tips for someone who is in a sales position and they need to be picking up the phone?
Top 3 tips. If I say just pick it up. First of all, just use your phone, right? There's nothing worse when people don't pick up the phone anymore and don't talk to people, as I say, right? Sending text messages. I remember when I sent my first ever sales text message to a client and went, can I actually text a client on their mobile, right? I mean, it was even like, should you call people on their mobile? Because everyone had landlines 20 years ago, right? It was kind of like, it's a bit of a faux pas to call people on their mobile. And then sending a text, I'm like, ooh, scary. And these days you get WhatsApps and God knows what, right? So I think the first thing is just use your phone. Be prepared, right? So if you're not used to cold calling or calling people, have a bit of a script. Maybe at least for your first couple of calls, just to to be prepared. And be prepared, and that's probably the third tip is, be prepared for voicemail. If you get to the voicemail, don't go like, oh shit, I didn't prepare for that, right? Leave a nice voicemail, be yourself, and give them a reason to call you back.
That's really good. That's really good. So you started off your career in telemarketing, and looking through your LinkedIn is a very impressive journey. So what are some of the highlights of your journey? And also, what are some of the lowlights?
So if I say over my whole career, let's start with the lowlights. Let's start with, because they're easier, right?
Okay. Okay.
And the reason I'm saying that is why I ended up doing what I'm doing now. So I went through, I think, 7 redundancies in my career.
7?
So yeah, it's not a competition, right?
Wow.
It's not a competition.
You definitely win, though.
It's one of those things, right? I work in an industry that quite volatile, right? So if I say I took my first redundancy in 2009, sorry. And then I moved into the digital industry, the edtech advertising technology. There was a lot of consolidation taking place in the industry. So over the years, if I say usually American companies, and this is no disrespect to my American friends, it's just happened to be American companies buying European companies.
Yeah.
And then a year after they acquired the company, they went like, "We had enough, Volker. You can go. We don't need you any longer." Oh. And nothing to do with my performance. I had bosses on the phone that were ill and go like, "Volker, don't worry. They would be silly to do that." But at the end of the day, as I always say, your number on an Excel sheet, your name, and your salary on an Excel sheet, right? And that's what you are.
Yeah.
And so I went through a few redundancies, which ultimately got me to the stage where I went, you know what, I can do the same job without anyone ever asking why I didn't hang around for longer than a year.
Yeah.
And earn a lot more money, charging a day rate, right? And paying a lot less tax. I'm like, what's not to like? So let's do that.
Yeah. Great deal.
So those are the lowlights. The highlights are, they're manifold. They're anything from developing people, as I say, helping people, having youngsters that you kind of, get onto their career. You help them to proceed to winning deals, right? I mean, winning deals is always a highlight, right? When you're part of a team, or whether you're an individual contributor role or not, right? There's always a team around you that where you win that deal, you earn commission, and you drive the business forward. That's always the nice things that happen.
Is there a favorite deal that you have?
Is there a favorite deal? There are probably several. Without them to go off, right? But do you big media deals we got in? I launched. Unfortunately, it wasn't my company, but I launched on behalf of a friend. I launched his company in the UK, and we sold to agencies big media deals. And getting like 6-digit media deals, media budgets in where you made on average, I don't know, 30% margin and stuff. Right. And those were good days, right? When you go like, okay, team, let's go for a drink, but it's midday, folks.
Maybe two.
But yeah, exactly. Days like these are great, right? Or when you're working on a deal for a longer period of time, so enterprise deals that naturally just take 6 to 12 months or even longer, and eventually they go over the line, right? And you're like, yeah, and you see, because usually I start to, I work with companies, if I say in the scale-up space, which means, deals like that just made a difference because, it catapults a company forward, and, you just saw the impact you had on the business as well. So it wasn't like, I don't know, be it Oracle or Salesforce somewhere, and you bring a deal and people go like, oh, great. Yeah. It's like, no, this made a difference. Right? Yeah. And I'm not saying you can't make close deals, to make a difference in Salesforce, but they're harder, much bigger deals.
Yeah, it's much harder. So we had a guest on the podcast, and one of the things he said was that he feels like you learn a lot more from your losses than you do from your wins. Do you think that's true?
Do you learn more from your losses than from your wins? See, let me answer that with a question, or with a statement. A lot of people say, you need failure to succeed. All right. And I think that's bullshit.
Okay.
And the reason I'm saying that is because you need to learn from failure. to get success.
Yes.
And that's a slight different, right? So So coming back, right? You need to fail, but then learn from those failures in order to then, succeed somewhere else, right? And if I say that's true in life, that's true in, we talked about basketball earlier, right? In sports, wherever it is, right? I mean, you probably know that much better than me about whoever it was that how many shots, he failed, and, but then, I'm trying to think of support. But,
Michael Jordan. It was Michael Jordan. He was basically saying,
more Jordan, wasn't it?
I've missed more than I've made. And he goes through all the stats of how much he's missed, how many game-winning shots he's missed. But then it's kind of like, but that's exactly why I win, because I learn from those things. I can grow from those things.
So in that sense, coming back to your original question, you probably learn more from your failures because you know what doesn't work. But also, I think you can learn a lot from your wins as well.
What are some of the things that you've learned from your wins?
Oh, if I say what worked,
what are some
simple answer, right?
Things? Yeah. But what are some things that, if you think back over your favorite deals and you picked one thing from each of those deals, what was the difference maker, or what was one of the big difference makers?
So the first thing that comes to mind is relationships, right? A lot of deals come down to relationships and trust. Ultimately, if you have a good relationship with the client trusts you. And then once the client trusts you, I don't want to say you can sell anything, right? But, if there's a mutual understanding of what you're selling actually makes a difference to the client, then there's a different basis. And, if I say you get away with, if the product, when you're working for startups, sometimes the product isn't 100%, right? So again, it comes down to that relationship, to have that relationship, to have that trust, to say, okay, by having that trust, we can try something. We can try something together. So it's more partnerships than a sale. And then you might just have a proof of concept, and that works, and then you build it from there. So that's probably something I learned over the years. If I say relationship is everything, right? But of course, if you have a product that the client doesn't want, what's the point of the relationship, right? So we could have a good relationship. If I want to sell you Hoover and you don't need a Hoover, then I'm not going to have a sale, right? It's just going to work. But you might go like, oh, I really like you, Volker. I buy a Hoover anyway. Or you go like, I know someone who needs a Hoover, right? And then, and that's how relationships work. And I built a lot of relationships over the years. And, if I say particularly in the media industry, those relationships are, for better or for worse, a lot of them are fueled by, if I say pubs and dinners and lunch.
Food and drink.
Fermented. I mean, you worked in media, you know how it works. And, and it's nice, right? I mean, I still have friendships to this day, right? With former clients, with former colleagues. And, it's just a nice industry to work in.
Yeah, definitely. Where in your career did you start leading people?
Oh, I'm trying to think. I think officially when I moved into media. So I started, as I say, in telemarketing. So that was for events, and then moved on to a different events company. And so I launched a company, a trade show for online digital marketing in Germany. Heavily involved in the French shows and UK shows, American shows. So it was a global trade show. And after I launched it, I had 6 offers from the industry to move across, which was great. It was very flattering. And I took a role with a search engine marketing agency. So I thought that's a safe bet. Can't go wrong with it. And I had my first member of staff, a lady called Gemma. So still in touch with her today. So that was my first management position.
And what were some of the things that you had to learn in that first management position?
See, it's quite interesting. If I say always very timely. So just this morning, a fellow sales coach actually put an article up on LinkedIn saying, you get into these positions and no one ever tells you how to manage, right? Because they don't. And my argument would be, go and get a sales coach, right? Of course, you need a sales coach, someone who tells you how to perform those roles. Yeah. So the lady was in marketing, and if I say she was quite junior at the time, Not that I was very senior at the time, to be honest, but looking back, I wasn't. So what did I have to learn? Again, build, similar to sales, you need to build a relationship with a member of staff. You need to build the trust, particularly since we were based in different offices. So I was based in London and she was based up in York. So having that relationship, the regular catch-ups, the cadence, let's say following up on the to-dos, having regular reviews, those kind of things. But if I say I always, so when I left uni and we touched on that earlier as well, I always wanted to become a manager. So I turned jobs down because they didn't want to employ me as a manager. And, people don't, right? I mean,
you never managed,
listened to some people. It's like, they don't put graduate in management positions. I should have known that 20 years ago. I didn't. I was very naive sometimes, but looking back. But yeah, so I enjoyed it. If I say I had ambition to be a good manager. So, I read lots of interesting books on management. I had all the theory on management from my degrees and stuff. And then once a sudden you're in that position, you go like, okay, what is the right cadence? What have other managers done with me? And I had some great managers early on in my career. So some I'm looking back to now and go like, why didn't I stay longer in those jobs? I could have learned a ton more, right? But if I say you hardly ever leave, or if I say you hardly ever leave because of your manager, normally you hang around longer because you have a good manager, right? But then if the manager leaves, you leave as well. So yeah, so what did I learn? Yeah, just again building this relationship, having regular catch-ups, building the trust, and I think particularly now in the remote world, you don't want to micromanage. I never enjoyed micromanaging or being micromanaged, right? So you want to know what that person is up to. And we're talking before Slack, we're talking before Teams, right? We used to be on Microsoft Manager, I think, or Microsoft Messenger. That's what it was called, right? Yeah, exactly. So, if I say it wasn't pre-mobile phone, but, I remember my first BlackBerry, I got in that job, for better or for worse. It was different, right? It's, you had to pick up the phone and go like, oh, how are things going?
Were there any? Oh, sorry, go on.
Just having the communication, the open communication. I think that for me was key. And then you pick and choose what you learn from your managers. You see what they do right and what they do wrong. And I think I always got along with the people I managed. I mean, ask them. I go like, oh dear.
You mentioned some of the great managers that you had. So on the podcast, we like to shout out the great managers that we had. So who were some of those managers that you had, and what was the top thing that you took from each of those managers?
Oh, where do I start? How many am I allowed to name? So.
As many as you like.
So in my first job in telemarketing, I had two great managers. One was Alex, who was my team lead officially, and Ant, who was he led the whole telemarketing team for Europe. And the amount of stuff I learned from him, I didn't realize it at the time, but that was gold. That was gold. And I if I say in hindsight, I probably should have stayed longer with him, but hindsight is always a beautiful thing, right? So he, those two, and in particular, probably because it was my first job, right? It's, every time I see them, and I don't see them very often, right? I bumped into Ant, I think it was just after lockdown, randomly in Old Street and had a good chat, which is always nice. I had a great, sales manager.
What were like, pick one lesson from each of them that you learned?
So Ant just said it. Wow. There was 3-4 levels up. So you're coming in as a graduate, and you're looking up to that guy, and you go like, he's God, right? I mean, how does he manage, right? And I always thought like, oh, he can't do this, he's not doing that. Is he really on top of it? But he knew everything that was going on, but he never shouted about it, and that's what I liked about him. It's just brilliant. But what Alex was, because he was a team lead, was much more hands-on. So he really got involved. He was one. If you had any questions, he took you aside. He talked you through stuff, which was great. He was just, super useful to learn from. Yeah. I mean, as I say, I think for a graduate job, I could have not asked for better managers.
That's awesome.
So definitely shout out to those two. I don't know if they're listening in, but I can tag them.
Yeah, we can tag them in it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of my jobs. I mean, I worked with a chap called Paul, Paul Sinclair at DMGT, who I learned a lot again from a sales perspective. I mean, packages he tied up, amazing. I mean, the creativity in sales, I definitely learned from him. The confidence in sales. Was he a great people manager? I don't think he did care too much. I mean, Paul, sorry if you're hearing that now, but I don't think there was ever anything you were too bothered about. You just wanted to have a good time, which was fine. But the way he sold, the way he put packages together, I mean, that experience, I just, like a sponge, I just soaked all that up. I just love that. I mean, seriously, I'm not lying. I still have it today. Where I go into a situation, go like, oh, why can't we look at it differently and package it up like that? And I'm going, this is Paul talking. He's still there, right? He's still there. I mean, he ruined me for life, but in a good way. So great sales guy. Absolutely great sales guy. Loved working with him. Who else do we have? I'm just trying to think to pick some good ones. I mean, one that definitely comes to mind is, and unfortunately he passed away a couple of years ago, was Andy Knobs. So he again, great manager. He took me over after my manager left at Civolution Teletracks, which then sold to Force Insights. And again, Andy just, we just had this trusting relationship. When you just trust people blindly, you had common goals, common objectives. And if I say both from a personal and professional level, he pushed you, he pushed you to, to succeed, to get better, to move forward. And on the other hand, with all the stuff that was going on with acquisitions and everything else, he was always very honest. If I say sometimes maybe too honest, but I like that. Something I picked up, from him and learned from him, to be actually honest with people. People notice when you start lying to them, right? It's just, so yeah, great manager. So unfortunately no longer with us. Trying to think if I had other good managers. I mean, I'm sure there, I had some other managers, I learned a lot from, if I say for better or for worse. Yeah. so, but I don't know if they deserve a shout out, to be honest.
No.
So probably those four, I think, are people I will remember.
So when you started to get into like really senior roles, how did you find that?
So on the one hand, I felt like, yes, I finally get the jobs I deserve, right? Because that's where everyone wants to be.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You start out in your sales career and you go like, oh, I want to be VP sales, right? I want to be CEO. And once you get there, you go like, oh yeah, great. I've done it. I deserve it, right? It's me. And then you go, shit, what am I actually doing? Right? That's your second thought. You go like, I have to know. The whole imposter syndrome kicks in, right? And you go like, do I actually know what I'm doing? And it's funny. Just again, very timely. I had a conversation this morning with someone about a role, about an interim role, and they said all they need is X, Y, and Z. She goes like, yeah, that's all they need. And I'm like, I've been doing it for years. I know what I'm doing. But when you first get into that role, you go like, really, is that all? And do I miss something? So you get this imposter syndrome, and that's where the good managers come in, right? That actually take you and say, okay, this is what we're looking at. And the worst ones are, and I had a few of those as well, that trying to manage you and trying to tell you what they need. And you go like, actually, you don't need that. This is not what you need. So, so it's this balance. But yeah, you get into the role and you go, yeah, actually, do I know everything we need? Because no one tells you what to look out for. So I was in one role once, and I remember I was just thrown into the deep end, and they were like, I'm sure you know what you're doing. Go and do it. And I'm like, great. Of course I know what I'm doing. If I say, I don't want to say I didn't, but I didn't know at the time that I knew what I was doing. Because if you do things for the first time, you don't have the confidence.
Yeah.
And it was actually a turnaround job. So I turned around a business unit successfully. And once I've done it, I'm like, yeah, that's what I need to do. There's my blueprint. So the next time I had to do it, I could do it again. But the first time you're doing it, you go like, can you if I say, can you trust your gut instinct? Can you trust what you learned and over the years and what you observed? And sometimes it's nice to have a boss where you can go like, actually, am I doing the right thing? But you don't ask those questions, right? You naturally don't go up to your manager and go like, actually, am I doing the right thing? Because you don't want to look like you don't know what you're doing. So it's this fine balance. And if you then have someone where you go, and you have that trust and you can go to and say, listen, I know it's a silly question, but am I actually doing the right thing? Then, this is gold. This is really, really helpful.
And you mentioned that, no one tells you some of these things. What are some of those things that you would tell someone who's going to be going into a role like that?
I think it's not, if I say it's easy to say these are the 5 things to look out for, because if I say every situation is slightly different.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, let's say you take on a sales leadership position, right? The first thing you want to see is, okay, what are people doing in their CM, right? Are they actually performing? What KPIs do they have? What KPIs to look out for? What does a sales process look like? So all these things I'm now doing as a consultant, right? Where I go into companies and look at these basic things, which I call a sales audit, right? But essentially every time you go into sales leadership position, you need to do that sales audit. And you need to look at, where can you optimize the process, right? What's been done in the CRM? Is what been done in the CRM useful? Is the stuff you report useful for the people, you report to? And it's actually all these small things, right? All these, admin that a lot of salespeople didn't like. That's where I differ, right? I always liked this, this stuff. And I like, going into nitty-gritty data bit and see, okay, how far have deals moved? How quickly have they moved? Will we hit target? How big does the pipeline need to be? Right? It's one of the, if I say, fun bits to do, right? You go in and go like, so what's your conversion rate? How big is your pipeline? And then you do the math and you go like, so how are you going to achieve target? And they go like, don't know. And, and then shit, we have a problem.
Yeah.
Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah.
and it's just going in and doing all the hygiene stuff. Whilst a lot of people still have sales targets to hit themselves, right? So balancing that and then coaching the people to get where they need to be, because otherwise it looks shit on you, right? Because you're managing them. So because, even as a manager, you can't, not hit target, years in a row and say, oh, it's my team that's not performing. But you're managing that team. You have the responsibility. Yeah. So if you have shit people on your team, you need to get rid of them. And that's, again, this is, if you're in your first ever sales leadership position, you don't want to go and say, okay, James is out, Joe is out, they're not performing, right? That's the last thing you want to do. But once you've done it a couple of times, it might be the first thing you're going to do. You look at the figures and go like, these two, they just need to go, right? And building up that confidence comes over time, right? And comes with experience. And as a consultant, it's a lot easier nowadays, I have to say, because you go and go like, these are the numbers. That's the situation. Let's make decisions.
So you mentioned that you're now in more of a fractional role. So how did you start to move into that, and how long have you been in it for now?
5 years this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if I say classic 2019,
Okay.
If I say I took it under the redundancy, I just left a political shit show, quite frankly, and I'm like, I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to do another year here, another year there, just to end up with another redundancy. So I originally set out to become a leadership coach, which subsequently I have been doing, and I'm in the process actually of launching a second brand for that. But so I've been coaching for the last 5 years, if I say more in the background, so a lot of platforms. whilst, if I say, as I started the journey, a friend of mine called me up and he says, Volker, can you help us? We need someone 3 days a week to build the partnership with Salesforce. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I understand Salesforce and understand the program, the products they have. And if I say that gives me a little bit of buffer to do all the other things I actually wanted to do. And as so often in my career, I got sucked into that and really enjoyed doing that. So I'm like, here I am 3 days a week doing something, earn good money, was quite successful. And then, of course, 2020 came along and changed the world. And again, my first gut instinct was, I need to find a job. So I applied for jobs and met some really, really good sales leaders, actually, who then said to me, Volker, the job you're applying for is not senior enough for you. You know that. And I'm like, yeah, but I need a job, right? It's the pandemic and stuff.
Yeah.
And they said, we get that. But, so anyway, so I soldiered on and picked up another interim role or another fractional role in the summer, actually helping a startup, and then picked up in the summer of 2020, picked up an interim role where, I transformed the sales team, some hands-on sales for UK development for the company. And if I say that the journey took me from there to other interim roles. And then for the last, if I say 2 years, I'm focusing a lot more on fractional roles, which means instead of doing a certain amount of days, if I say per week, where I'm literally in the business, I'm more doing, if I say 5 to 6 days, maybe a month, and split my time, a little bit more, if I say I'm not as much in the business, but I'm still kind of like doing bits and pieces and do a lot of sales coaching these days. So I'm working with, if I say anywhere from SDR all the way up to VP sales, for coaching, group coaching sessions, and leadership coaching. As I say, this is now taking off as well, but still do interim hands-on roles. So I still enjoy doing the sales myself. So it's still fun, right? It's still fun to after all those years to pick up the phone and sell.
How do you manage to still have a great impact in 5 to 6 days a month? Because I'm guessing like you're getting fractional work because you're good at doing fractional. So how do you have good impact in that short space of time in a month?
So I think it depends how on the role, right? So if it's a fractional role where if I say IC, individual contributor, then it's usually because of my network, right? So in that particular role, I'm doing, again, it's selling into the German market. It's into network I know, an industry I know. So even with small amount of time, I can have a big impact. And if I say that the company doesn't necessarily need a full-time position there at the moment, and can't justify potentially the position either, because I guess, and that's true for most fractional roles. And again, very timely discussion I had this morning. If you starting out fresh, let's say in the German market, doesn't have to be in the German market, in the UK market, wherever, and if you put an investment in, let's say you put a country manager in, you put a sales manager in, you put an account manager in, once of a sudden you have salary cost of, I don't know, $250,000 or whatever, right? You might need an office. Maybe these days you don't, right? Local law, contracts, all that jazz, right? With me, I'm going in 6 days a week, right? You get an invoice from me at the end of the month, right? Yeah. I can build a strategy for you.
Yeah.
I can utilize my network.
Yeah.
It's a lot less risk. If I can bring the contracts in, right, 100, 200, 300 grand, right? Once you have one or two of those in, you can go like, okay, do we now want to invest that money and, actually build a team? And I'm in similar situations with other companies I worked or, proposals I have out where, I'm if I say the way I pitch myself in is I literally build the strategy whilst I'm, doing the business development for the company. And if I say it's almost like a dual role where you help them with the go-to-market strategy, you help them with the marketing, you help them with the positioning. So all the strategic bits, but you're doing that whilst trying to win some business. And if you then win one or two pieces of business, it kind of pays for yourself, which is always good, right? So people go like, oh yeah, he was worth his money. It's important. Return on investment, right? Very simple. But then, of course, you either then have to build a team or you continue with the role, right? And sometimes, and I've done both, right? I've either built a team or I just replaced myself. So I hired literally my replacement, got that person in, and then I exited again. And that's the life of a consultant, right? As it is. But it's a combination of strategic and, if I say, operational impact you have. And it's, if I say, a low cost way. So what I find at the moment, if I say it's a low cost way of companies to trial things out, right? Whether they work. What I find at the moment, particularly at the beginning of this year, quite a few companies came up to me and say, we've never had sales. We don't know if it works for us. But 2023 showed us we kind of need sales, or we think we need sales, and we need someone experienced to come in, but we don't want to invest, in someone really expensive, because it's a huge risk, right? If you have a 12-month sales cycle, so I worked with a company at the end of last year, they have a 12-month sales cycle, literally. If they get into the company, all happy days. But if you invest in a really senior salesperson for 12 months as a startup or scale up and pay them a full-time salary, it's a huge investment. And you might not need the full time, right? And that's where I can come in. I can do that role for 12 months on a part-time basis. And then if it works, if the money comes in, I can then write the whole strategy. I can see what works. And then say, okay, this is the kind of person you want to hire. And then I hire that person, onboard that person, and then I'm off. And it's just really cost effective to try out the sales work for us. And more companies. And as I say, this year I've had, probably a good handful of conversations around that to build, sales strategies and sales teams for companies that never had sales because they relied on their network, they relied on their reputation, etc.
It's such an interesting mix of like super high level strategy and in the detail of doing. It's a really, really interesting mix. Really, really interesting mix.
And a lot of people don't want to do that, right? Because once you get to a certain level, I want to be honest, right? I don't know who all is listening, but I prefer the strategic stuff, right? Of course, it's more fun, if you're totally removed, right? Who wants to get their hands dirty? But I'm still happy to do that, and I think that makes me stand out because anyone can write a strategy, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Fine, you got your money, you're off, right? But building it, it's like building the plane whilst you're flying, right? It's like building it whilst you're actually doing it, because you're learning, you get the direct feedback loop, and that's a beauty. So I find it quite interesting. Maybe sad me, right?
No, I really like that. And so I come from a analytics coding kind of background, and there comes a point where you start leading teams and you don't code anymore. And the other day I had to do some coding and I was like, I actually enjoy coding. Like, why did I ever stop doing this?
Yeah, to be honest, it was about a year ago. Someone employed me, and again, they never had a sales team, so it's a similar story actually. And what they needed at the time was literally someone to just phone a certain amount of clients. And I'm like, I know you pay me a lot of money. I said, but I don't mind doing it. So I did it. And I mean, we parted ways for other reasons, but I actually really enjoyed it. This is great. Like picking up the phone and, going around to secretaries, and the gatekeepers and, and it's just this muscle memory. You've done it once.
Exactly.
And it's still fun. Would I want to do it 5 days a week? No, not anymore. No. But it's, you learned it. Why not?
Yeah. Volker, just as we close, we're going to do our quick-fire questions.
Cool.
What is the difference for you between a great leader and a good leader?
Ooh. I have to answer that on the spot, don't I?
Yep.
So I'm going to be cheeky and answer this. A great leader has a lot of confidence, a lot of integrity, and a lot of emotional intelligence. And it's just part of the team, and it's an integral part of the team.
Great answer. You're good on the spot. So that's a good answer. That was a very good answer.
Thank you. Learn that in sales.
Yeah, that's true. So doing this, salespeople are usually very good at this part. So what are the top 3 things that you hire for?
Experience, first of all. Personality, hugely for me. So experience, personality. I want to say past success, but it's not always.
Okay.
But yeah,
that's okay. I'll allow that answer. If you were going to start your career again, but with what you knew now, what would you do?
I probably stayed longer in telemarketing and made a lot more cash.
Okay.
Quite frankly, it was a great way of making cash. And I would be a lot more patient. So I was chasing the next thing and chasing the next thing, which also, if I say then, was accelerated by the redundancies I took. But I think sometimes, and when I do career coaching with all kinds of levels, right? Sitting there and, people go like, oh yeah, but this job is better, and I want to go somewhere else. The grass is always greener. And I was always chasing the money. Stop chasing the money. I know as a salesperson, get it out of your head. Stay somewhere for longer, really build up experience, build up a network, and then move up. So I think, if I could have stayed longer somewhere, I think it would have been nicer.
I think a specific question for you based on your background. This isn't a normal tick fire question, but what have you learned from so many redundancies?
To never give up. Very simple, very simple answer, right? So I got into meditation around about 2006. And the reason I got into meditation was all the successful people are meditating, right? So there must be something I should be doing it. But I think without that meditation practice, without connecting to my inner self, I think I wouldn't be in the same place, I would be now. And I don't mean that, in a really bad place, but I know so many people that left the industry, changed careers, gave up. But, it actually gave me resilience and I learned so much from it. But it took a lot out of me as well, right? It's just, really, it's a mindset game. At the end of the day, I mean, sales is a mindset game as well. And, on that note, you've unfortunately find a lot of, ill mental health, right? In sales, people that can't cope with the pressure, anxiety, depression, etc. So that's an area, as I mentioned in our pre-talks, I'm studying to be a psychotherapist over the next few years, and it's definitely an area I want to look into as well, because there's so many salespeople that can do this help.
Definitely,
and it's often just totally overlooked.
Really good answer, Volker. Thank you so much. Sorry.
It's a sad note to end, right? But
I think it is and it isn't, because I think that in the world that we live in now, mental health and understanding things like pressure, burnout, all of those kind of things, even just connecting to yourself, understanding, that's becoming an increasing part of our awareness and actually what we do. So I think that it is a bit of a sad thing that actually that's what's happening to people. It's also a hopeful thing, because actually people like you who have been in those positions, who have been successful, are now coming back to actually help those same people. So for me, that's a hopeful thing. Yeah,
exactly. You're probably right. I mean, it's just, it's not well addressed, if I say, in any industry. But if I look at some of the sales organizations, more and more actually looking into that. And if I say there's hope, because salespeople are under immense pressure.
Absolutely.
If I say, especially in this day and age, it seems to get worse and worse. And as you mentioned, right, stress, burnout, anxiety is just too common, unfortunately.
Someone was saying that the average senior salesperson is in their role for it's less than 2 years now. It's 15 to 18 months. So that pressure and that kind of, you have to make an impact really quick and really hot. It's it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's why we love it.
For being on the podcast.
Thank you.
This was absolutely awesome. Yeah. Really enjoyed our conversation. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Tulu. It was great.
Good. And thank you guys for listening, and see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to another episode of What Makes You Tick. I hope that you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed having the conversation.
Absolutely. There's so much value in learning from virtual mentors, people that have already gone through incredible careers, and they've got wonderful stories and lessons that they can share for you to have a bigger and better career in tech. And if you like this sort of content, we've also got a newsletter that we publish weekly called Growth Magnet, all about tech startups, leadership, scaling, and performance. We'll put a link in the show notes, and it'll be fantastic to see your comments on our next post.